Eric will come and join us in a few minutes. Well, thank you all for joining us here today. I'm here to talk about the D.C. crime bill that's come forward. And I just want to give you some context here. In Washington, D.C., carjackings have increased consecutively 5 years, year over year. In the past 3 years, the number of carjackings in the District of Columbia has tripled. Homicides, 200 homicides in the past 2 years. And today, in February, we're running 20% ahead of where we were last year in terms of the number of homicides committed here in the District of Columbia. Sexual abuse is up 82%, motor vehicle theft up 96%, and property theft in general is up 19%. Violent crime has become an epidemic in this country, and the District of Columbia is no exception to this epidemic. We're seeing a crime wave here, and Americans from across the country come to visit the District of Columbia. This is the Federal District. This is a place where I had, just this morning, 75 of my constituents in to visit. They view the capital of their nation as a place that should be sacrosanct and a place that should be safe. Yet unbelievably, despite this crime wave that's underway, the need to get tougher on crime, obviously, the District of Columbia Council recently passed legislation to reduce penalties for many violent criminal offenses right here in the district, including carjackings, robberies, and even homicides. Primarily, the bill eliminates mandatory minimum sentencing requirements, and it reduces maximum penalties for serious offenses. Recognizing that Washington, D.C. citizens and visitors want safer streets, Mayor Bowser actually vetoed this legislation. But the D.C. Council overrode her veto. Reducing penalties for violent crime in the midst of an ongoing crime wave obviously sends the wrong message. It will only serve to embolden criminals who are on a massive spree right here in Washington with carjackings, assaults, and homicides. As Mayor Bowser put it in vetoing the bill, this bill does not make us safer. Well, I couldn't agree more. That's why I'm leading the Senate resolution to block this bill under the D.C. Home Rule Act. In our nation's capital, Congress has a constitutional obligation to preserve law and order because Americans travel here from all over the country to meet with their federal representatives. They shouldn't have to worry about their safety. The D.C. Council's bill makes our nation's capital less safe for residents, for employees, and people that would visit us here from around the country and from around the world. Under the U.S. Constitution, Congress is responsible for governing the District of Columbia. Some of that authority has been delegated to the D.C. government, but Congress retains the authority to review and to take action on D.C. laws. This resolution passed with significant bipartisan support in the House. In fact, every Republican and 31 Democrats voted to support this bill in the House of Representatives. The 31st Democrat actually had been mugged in her apartment that morning before coming over to cast the 31st vote in favor of this resolution. I implore my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join this effort. Let's send our resolution to disapproval to President Biden's desk. I can't believe that President Biden wants to encourage more crime here in the District of Columbia. Combating crime should not be a Republican or a Democrat issue. It should be a common sense issue, a bipartisan issue. So thank you. I'd like to introduce Senator Braun now, who would like to speak next.
Thank you, Senator Hagerty, for bringing this up. I've been here now 4 years, a little over, and you shouldn't have to be fearful when you're just walking on any street, D.C. especially. I think it has an analog, too, across the country. I was in our state capital, Indianapolis, 6 months ago. Weather was nice then, and from Monument Circle, which is a couple, 3 blocks from our state capital, had to sidestep folks on the street in the middle of the day. The crime that we're dealing with here is rampant across the country, and I think it's an eye-opener, and this, hopefully, will sail through because it's our nation's capital, but the symptoms, the issues, are the same across the country. You look at another Midwestern town, Chicago, the Magnificent Mile, that stretch in downtown Chicago that you used to be able to feel completely safe. from what happened in the summer of 2020 there and across the country. I think they've got like a 35% vacancy rate down there. It's no good. Sooner or later, if you don't keep your cities safe, many that are our state capitals to boot across the country, many run by the same politics for years. To me, this is an excellent way. You say that enough is enough. Thank you for bringing it to the forefront, and hopefully this kind of thing will cascade across the country where those same problems are there as well.
Thanks to Senator Hagerty for leading this effort. We've seen this movie before. We all remember the disastrous defund the police movement, where this idea was we needed to reimagine public safety. The only problem was the people reimagining public safety forgot the fact that law enforcement is there not only to protect us, but to deter people from committing offenses in the first place. And the message that these pieces of legislation out of the D.C. Council send is one of not support for law enforcement, but one which undermines law enforcement's important role. I know in my state across Texas, they're having trouble recruiting and retaining police officers in almost every city in the state. And a lot of that is because law enforcement thinks that we do not have their back, that we do not support them. Well, even the communities, minority communities, majority minority communities in Texas and elsewhere, they understand the importance of having a police presence in their city or in their part of their city, because they are the ones who are primarily victimized by criminal activity. So the statistics are shocking. More than 200 homicides, 2,000 robberies, and nearly 4,000 instances of violence in violent crime in D.C. last year alone. And you might ask, well, what do senators from the various states like Texas, Indiana, Tennessee, and others, why should they care what's happening in D.C.? Well, because we work here, our staff lives here, and our constituents come visit the nation's capital almost every single day that the Capitol is open. And we want to make sure all of them are safe, and particularly here in the nation's capital. Given the role that Congress has to play, as Senator Hagerty pointed out, it is our responsibility to just say no to the City Council in trying to undermine support for law enforcement and for the police. Senator Kennedy.
I, too, want to thank Senator Hagerty for leading this effort. I'll make 2 quick points. We are all responsible for our actions. It doesn't matter how badly we're feeling that day. It doesn't matter what someone else has done to us. We are responsible for our actions, and that's a bedrock principle of an ordered society. I'm sorry that the City Council in the District of Columbia doesn't understand that. Number 2, I do not know why this is. If I make it to heaven someday, I'm going to ask. But there are people in our society, American society and others, they are not sick, they're not mixed up, they're not confused. It's not that their mother or father did not love them enough. They're just antisocial. They hurt other people, and they steal their stuff. And the first principle of government, the first purpose of government is to protect people and their property. And we have to separate people who are anti-society from everybody else. That's just the way it is. I wish it wasn't, but it is. And I'm sorry the City Council in the District of Columbia does not understand that, but it is our responsibility to correct their jaundiced view of the world.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank, as everyone else, echo the appreciation for Senator Hagerty for bringing this forward. I come at this as a former Attorney General of my state of Missouri, and we have seen crime ravage our communities across the country, and Washington, D.C. is no different. And I think what's important to keep in mind, beyond just mandatory minimums and maximums and a lot of the language and statistics that get thrown out there, is that real people are suffering. There are grandmothers that are tired of sweeping up the glass on Sunday mornings. There are mothers and daughters and sons who are dying, who are living in fear as people terrorize their communities. And I do think it's incumbent upon us to step up and do something about that. And I don't think for a minute that this needs to be a partisan issue. It shouldn't be. No one has, I don't think, ever accused the mayor of Washington, D.C. of being a Republican. But this is something I think that cuts across socioeconomic categories, party labels, that this is our opportunity to stand up and fight for the people who deserve protection no matter what their zip code is.
Yes.
You noted the bipartisan support that this brought in the House. Have you had any conversations with your Democratic colleagues here in the Senate?
So far, I've focused on my colleagues on the Republican side. We have 48 Republican co-sponsors so far. And I have to believe that with the bipartisan support that we've seen in the House of Representatives, that same sort of emotion should set forth here. As Senator Schmidt said, this shouldn't be a partisan issue. And I do believe that there's a very good chance that we will have a number of Democrat senators that will want to join this, because I think they see the same issues that we do. This is the nation's capital, the federal District of Columbia, and all of us want our constituents to be able to come here in safety, not in fear. Yes.
In response to criticisms from folks like the DC delegate Norton, who say that this is essentially anti-democratic, it's this government of people who aren't from DC coming in and dictating to DC what its laws should do.
I would suggest you read the Constitution and the D.C. Home Rule Act. It's our obligation under the Constitution and the D.C. Home Rule Act to review these laws, and when they are laws that make no sense, like this one, in the midst of a crime wave, to be reducing penalties for serious crimes, I think that demonstrates a very serious need for oversight, and that's precisely what we're doing.
And this would, if this does pass with, like you say, potentially Democratic support, it would go before President Biden. Have you gotten any indication whether or not the president would sign something like this, or what would what would it represent for him to have to make that decision?
I'm sure it's a decision that's going to be very difficult in this White House. They were elected on the mantra of defunding the police. In this situation, we have the Fraternal Order of Police at a national level and at a local level supporting our action. So I think the White House is going to have to evaluate the politics of the matter and think about their own safety, too. Many of the White House staff work here, and again, many people come from around the country and around the world to visit in the White House. I should think they would have the same considerations that my colleagues and I have.
And if I may, one off-topic question. Tomorrow there's going to be a hearing for the IRS nominee, Danny Werkel. What are you thinking you'd like to see from that as folks evaluate this potential nominee for the IRS?
I think all of us are concerned with respect to the weaponization of the IRS that's taken place. I've had the Treasury Secretary before me 3 times. Each time I've asked her who's going to be held to account for leaking confidential, private taxpayer information that has occurred during this administration and on her watch. Each time I get some non-answer. We're looking into it. I think the American public is very distrustful of the IRS right now. That's a shame. Our institution should be respected. But given the way they've been weaponized, I think there's a great deal of concern. The concern becomes even greater when we have the massive $80 billion influx of funding going to the IRS. I don't think they can handle it. I don't think they can recruit to the standards that they probably should to hire a tremendous number of auditors to go after the middle class here in America. So it's going to be it's a great concern that's felt by constituents in my home state, and I think it's something we'll need to address tomorrow.
Is tomorrow an opportunity where they could sort of ease those concerns? Do you think that's possible?
I'd like to hear tomorrow who they've held to account for disclosing confidential taxpayer information. Again, it's been done to hurt political enemies of this administration. I'd be interested to see if they're going to be in a position to disclose that tomorrow. Yes.
Realistically, what are the next steps for this resolution? Isn't it the case that the majority leaders have to bring this up, and you can imagine who would want to find that situation?
I would think, given the bipartisan support that we've already seen from the House, and they'll be sending something over here as well, we will be moving on this, I hope, after we get back from the next break in March. This is already in the process right now. There's a 20-day process. It's got to work its way through. It will ripen by the time we get back, and then it'll be a motion to bring it from the committee and then bring it onto the floor. We can deal with this pretty quickly. Yes.
So you've seen this resolution, we've seen another resolution related to the voting law from DC. Do you see this as sort of a blueprint to sort of advance House Republican priorities through the Senate related to DC in the future?
No, I see this as us exercising our responsibilities under the Constitution and the D.C. Home Rule Act. Thank you all.